So you write from behind the scenes of Facebook. What would you say is your key finding in your book?
Well, there's a lot of key findings, but I'd say the most important thing that one takes away from my book is a better understanding of Mark Zuckerberg, who has absolute and total control of Facebook. So if you don't understand him, you're never going to understand why the company makes the moves that it does. And in my reporting process, and I think I convey this in the book, I would say the most important revelation that I experienced was the understanding of the incredible consistency that he brings to his project. You know, he is an astonishingly unwavering person in the way he thinks about what he's trying to do, and I think that's one of the explanations for why he has been so effective. He's not impressed with being the person of the year. He's not impressed with having 600 million users. He's interested in making Facebook a platform that is used by as many people on the planet as possible.
Yeah.
And he sees that as an opportunity for 7 billion, and that's all he thinks about every day.
So what that would mean that like his vision is fulfilled at that moment. Every person living on this planet is part of his project.
I think his vision is further fulfilled with each new person who joins Facebook. But he doesn't celebrate his victories. He only thinks about what he still has to accomplish. And that's a very productive attitude for an entrepreneur, because he never gets cocky, he never gets complacent or self-satisfied. And it is astonishing how confident he is and how steadfast his vision is.
How would you describe the company Facebook? Is it still kind of a startup, or is it like changing slowly into huge corporate? How's the mentality in there, the mindset?
Well, it is slowly changing in a way that, you know, inevitably large companies do change. It gets a little more bureaucratic, but not very much. I mean, you know, it has always valued being a hacker culture. And there is still a very, very strong feeling of freedom, of the predominance of the engineers and the product people over everyone else, that, you know, creativity is encouraged, that bureaucracy is to be discouraged, even though inevitably it does creep in. And again, a lot of this does flow from the fact that one person has absolute and total authority, and he himself thinks of himself as a hacker. So he wants the company, you know, built around his own image.
So, yeah, but what is it if a hacker in mind is like really having all our data? How is he seeing that, and how do you see, is he seeing that?
He doesn't think of it in those terms. He doesn't think, oh, I'm getting their data. That's not the way he thinks of it. He only wants the data so that he can provide more services. I mean, he obviously wants to build a company, he wants to show people advertising, but he thinks advertising has benefits and can be useful. He doesn't see it as an intrinsically evil thing.
Yeah, but does he see like an ethical implication? But because what you say, he must not, or it's not necessary to do that on purpose, but still there's like an ethical implication.
I think that he totally takes the ethical responsibility very seriously of all the data that people entrust to Facebook, and he even though people think that he is a, you know, privacy predator, in reality he thinks of himself as being a privacy protector. And, you know, it is true, and it's inarguably true, that whatever you say about privacy on Facebook, it offered more privacy when it came along than any service that had ever existed on the internet. And that's why people were willing to use their real name and put their real data and be so free in their expressions on Facebook, because they knew there were privacy controls. And a great example of this is my 18-year-old daughter. She has 800 18-year-old friends on Facebook, but there are two people who are not her friends on Facebook, me and my wife. That is a form of privacy control that she's exercising, that Facebook gave her. By not being my friend, she ensures that I cannot see her data.
But that is like a private choice who's going to see that. The other thing is like when they now raise the money from Goldman Sachs, says, well, now they are like anti-stock market, so they might just planning or go on like using the data in some other sense than before. Is there any danger of that, would you say, or no, that's exaggerated?
I will say this is a question that every German interviewer always asks.
Well, that makes me a typical German.
I don't
interviewer.
think that it is nearly as big of a concern as is generally assumed in Germany. I think you have to ask those questions, in the bigger picture. It's realistic to question that, especially if control were to change and Zuckerberg would no longer be CEO. But, he's not managing the company in order to justify the valuation. That's one reason he doesn't want to go public, because I think he's afraid he might increasingly be forced to do that. And if that were to happen, conceivably, they might begin to be more disrespectful of the data, but they know their whole existence is dependent on the goodwill of the members towards them. Because if people began to feel that Facebook was a predator, then they're just going to stop using Facebook en masse.
Well, as a German publisher, I'd say I'm really crazy about Facebook because I love it. We get like a third of our traffic each day from Facebook. Do you think they will start like micropayments to make it also a platform where people pay for goods they get?
It's possible. I don't think you're going to have to pay for the traffic per se, but there's a whole lot of models that are likely to arise as Facebook becomes more and more useful. Their ability to charge both the consumer and the publisher or the marketer increases in a lot of ways, and they're aware of that. I don't think they're terribly greedy so far, and there's an awful lot that you can get from them for free. For example, the European can have a page on Facebook and get huge dialogue, and you don't pay them a penny for that. That's just something they're giving you, right? So they've done a pretty good job of offering free services. Now somebody, a paranoid German, for example, might say, oh, it's like crack. They're getting me addicted, and then one day they're going to charge me, they're going to sock me with the bill. That's possible, I suppose. I don't see it happening that way. That is not the way the company thinks, is all I can tell you. Nothing's impossible, however.
Where do you see the company in, let's say, 5 years? What is your idea about Facebook in 5 years?
Well, I still think that in 5 years that the platform that Facebook is building is increasingly going to be seen as the most critical part of what it has built, and that Facebook.com will be less important. In other words, these 2.5 million websites that Dan Rose talked about this morning that use the Facebook Connect, Facebook Open Graph tools to extend Facebook's capabilities onto their sites will grow, and that will be a larger and larger part of the way people use Facebook is outside the walls of Facebook.com. So I think that's a very big piece that will change. I do think also that more and more industries will incorporate sort of social interaction in their essence, in the way, as Dan described, Zynga and Playfish and other game companies are increasingly doing. And it really is stunning the way that gaming has been, all electronic gaming has been transformed by the emergence of Facebook. So that now, Facebook is much more important in terms of time than Electronic Arts or Activision or any of the historical game companies in terms of the amount of time people are spending playing games that are digital, even though they're different. And I think that same kind of transformation and shift could happen in a lot of businesses. We were talking about how it could happen in media. I think it could happen in retailing. I think it could happen in healthcare. I think it could happen in some ways even in banking.
Well, thank you. Thanks for this idea.